Saga of the Starlit Wolf. The wind, a razor-toothed hound, bit at Thormund's heels as he scrambled higher into the embrace of the unforgiving peaks. Each crunch of his worn leather boots on the frosted scree was a fresh insult, a reminder of the life he had lost. Below, nestled in the dark slash of the valley, lay his village, a place where his name was now a curse, spat from the lips of those who had once called him brother. The flickering hearth fires, once a beacon of warmth and belonging, were now cold stars in a galaxy of betrayal. He had been Thormund the Shieldbreaker, his laughter as loud and as frequent as the clash of steel in the training yard. His deeds were sung by skalds, his place beside the Jarl a certainty. But one moment of blind rage, a flagon of ale too many, and a rival's goading words had shattered it all. A life was lost, a sacred oath of hospitality broken, and the sentence was absolute: exile. To be a man without a clan was to be a ghost, a whisper on the wind, and the mountains were to be his eternal, silent companions. For days he had climbed, fueled by a self-loathing that burned hotter than any fire. The sparse pines gave way to barren rock, their gnarled branches reaching out like skeletal fingers. The world was stripped down to its essentials: stone, ice, and the aching emptiness in his soul. He hunted, his spear cast still true, but the meat was tasteless, turning to ash in his mouth. Sleep was a fleeting visitor, chased away by the gnawing cold and the even colder tendrils of regret. He was a warrior without a war, a man without a purpose, and the silence of the peaks was a deafening roar. One night, as the last vestiges of twilight bled from the western sky, a new light began to bloom in the heavens. It was the great dance of the ancestors, the shimmering, ethereal glow of the aurora. Ribbons of emerald and violet unfurled across the obsidian canvas, a silent symphony of cosmic grandeur. Thormund, despite the hollow cavern of his despair, could not help but stare in awe. It was a sight that made even a cast-out feel the breath of the gods on his neck. He had made his meager camp in the lee of a great, moss-covered boulder, a small fire spitting defiantly against the encroaching frost. As he sat, mesmerized by the celestial ballet, a movement at the edge of his vision broke the spell. He reached for his axe, his muscles coiling with the instinct of a lifetime of vigilance. There, on a rocky outcrop bathed in the spectral green light of the aurora, stood a wolf. But this was no ordinary creature of the mountains. Its fur was the color of freshly fallen snow, so bright it seemed to drink the starlight and radiate it back. It was a beacon in the gloom, its form sharp and clear against the swirling colors of the sky. Its eyes, two chips of ancient ice, held a wisdom that transcended the animal kingdom. Thormund's breath caught in his throat. He had seen wolves before, had hunted them and been hunted by them. They were creatures of cunning and ferocity, but this one was different. It carried an aura of profound stillness, an ancient power that hummed in the frigid air. Then, the impossible happened. The wolf opened its maw, but no snarl or growl emerged. Instead, a voice, like the grinding of glaciers and the whisper of the wind through ancient pines, echoed not in his ears, but directly in his mind. The heaviest stone is the one carried in the heart. Thormund scrambled backwards, his hand tightening on the haft of his axe until his knuckles were white. He was a man of steel and blood, of tangible things. This was the stuff of madmen's tales, of mushroom-induced visions. He blinked, expecting the apparition to vanish, but the wolf remained, its gaze unwavering. It took a step, not with the heavy tread of a creature of flesh and bone, but with a weightless grace, its paws seeming to hover a hand's breadth above the crystalline snow. It walked on air, a phantom of the frozen peaks. "Fear is a cage of your own making, son of man," the voice continued, calm and resonant. "The bars are forged in yesterday. What are you?" Thormund's voice was a ragged croak, the first words he had spoken to another being in what felt like a lifetime. The wolf tilted its head, the aurora's light playing across its ethereal fur. "I am a question that has yet to be answered. A shadow cast by a future that may not come to pass. You see me, Thormund, because your own shadow has grown long enough to touch mine." Thormund, the dishonored warrior, the exile, stared at the glowing beast that spoke in riddles and walked on air. The cold that had seeped into his bones seemed, for a moment, to recede, replaced by a different kind of chill, the icy touch of the truly unknown. The world, which had become so small and so bleak, had just cracked open, revealing a depth of mystery he could never have imagined. And in that moment, under the shimmering, starlit sky, his exile took on a new and terrifying meaning. The days that followed fell into a strange and unsettling rhythm. The wolf, whom Thormund came to think of as Vargen, the wolf, was a constant, yet elusive, presence. It would appear at dawn, a silent, glowing silhouette against the rising sun, and vanish with the deepening shadows of dusk. It never ate, it never drank, it never left tracks in the snow. Its existence was a defiance of all the laws of nature that Thormund had ever known. Their conversations were a tapestry of riddles and reflections. Vargen never spoke of mundane things, of the hunt or the weather. Its words were always aimed at the core of Thormund's being, peeling back the layers of his guilt and anger with the precision of a master carver. A shield can protect the body. Vargen's voice would echo in his mind as Thormund practiced his axework against a dead tree, the rhythmic thuds a poor substitute for the clang of a true battle. But what protects the soul from a wound inflicted by its own hand? Another time, as Thormund stared down at the distant, almost imaginary speck of his former village, the wolf's voice was softer, like the fall of fresh snow. "You long for the hearth, but the fire you truly need is the one you must kindle within." Thormund, in turn, found himself speaking aloud to the silent landscape, hoping the wolf would hear. He spoke of his shame, of the life he had so carelessly thrown away. He confessed the bitter envy he had felt for the man he had struck down, an envy that had festered in the darkness of his pride. He had never spoken these truths to anyone, and to voice them now in the vast, unjudging wilderness was a painful but necessary release. The nights were the strangest of all. When Thormund finally succumbed to an exhausted sleep, his dreams were not his own. He dreamt of a world of perpetual twilight, a realm of shadow and mist. He saw a colossal wolf, its fur the color of a starless midnight, its eyes burning with a cold, ancient fire. The beast was bound by chains, each link forged from the will of a god. He could feel the wolf's rage, a living, breathing entity that shook the very foundations of the dream world. He could feel its sorrow, a grief as vast and as deep as the ocean. In these dreams, Thormund was not himself. He was an observer, a disembodied spirit, but he could feel the phantom sensation of coarse, dark fur on his own limbs, the strain of impossibly heavy chains on his spectral shoulders. He tasted the metallic tang of divine magic, a power so immense it warped the fabric of reality. He heard a name, whispered on the dream winds, a name that struck a chord of primal fear in his soul, Fenrir. He would awaken with a gasp, the feel of phantom chains still on his wrists, his heart hammering against his ribs. He knew the sagas, the prophecies of the seers. He knew of Fenrir, the monstrous son of Loki, the great wolf destined to swallow the sun and slay Odin himself during Ragnarok, the final, cataclysmic battle of the gods. One morning, after a particularly vivid dream of the bound wolf straining against its fetters, Thormund confronted Vargen. The snow-white wolf sat serenely on a ledge, its form almost translucent in the morning light. "These dreams," Thormund began, his voice rough. "The great wolf, the chains. It is Fenrir." Vargen's icy eyes met his. "You see the father through the child." The riddle hung in the air, chilling Thormund more than the mountain wind. The child of Fenrir. The sagas spoke of Fenrir being bound until the end of days, but they were silent on whether the great wolf had sired any offspring before his imprisonment. You're his son? Thormund breathed, the words feeling like sacrilege. A child of his blood, yes, the voice in his mind confirmed. A splinter of his essence. We are the echo of his howl, the shadow of his fate. The gods, in their infinite wisdom and cruelty, did not just chain the father. They laid a curse upon the bloodline, a doom that chases us through the ages. We are born with the shadow of Ragnarok in our hearts, a destiny not of our choosing. Thormund stared at the luminous creature before him. This explained everything: the ethereal form, the unnatural wisdom, the sorrow that seemed to cling to it like a shroud. Vargen was a prisoner, just as its father was, but its chains were invisible, woven from fate and divine decree. My kind is born to fade, Vargen continued, a profound sadness coloring its mental voice. We are ghosts of a future tragedy. We walk between worlds, never truly belonging to either, until the weight of the inherited doom pulls us into nothingness. We are born to be forgotten. Why me? Thormund asked, the question that had haunted him since their first encounter. Why show yourself to me, an exile? Because you, too, are haunted by a fate you forged in a single moment, Vargen replied. You, too, feel the weight of a chain. Your past is your prison, Thormund. My future is mine. Perhaps a prisoner can best understand another. The pieces began to fall into place, forming a picture far grander and more terrifying than Thormund's personal disgrace. He was entangled in something ancient, a divine drama that had been playing out since the dawn of time. This mystical wolf was not just a guide for his soul, it was seeking a salvation of its own. There is a place, Vargen's voice grew softer, more urgent. A valley hidden from the eyes of gods and men. A place where the threads of fate are thin, where what is written can be unwritten. I have spent a lifetime searching for it, but my form weakens. The shadow grows. I cannot reach it alone. Thormund looked at his hands, calloused and scarred from a life of fighting for honor and glory. He had lost his honor, and the glory had faded to a bitter memory. But here, in the frozen wasteland, a new purpose was being offered to him. It was a mad, impossible quest, a journey into the heart of myth, guided by a phantom wolf. But it was a purpose nonetheless. He looked up, meeting the creature's gaze. Where is this valley? He asked. Tell me where we must go. The journey to the hidden valley was a trial of both body and spirit. Vargen, now with a shared purpose alongside Thormund, became a more tangible guide. It no longer vanished completely at dusk, but would lead him through the treacherous twilight hours, its faint glow a lantern in the oppressive darkness of the high passes. It guided him away from impassable ravines and avalanche-prone slopes, its knowledge of the mountains seeming as ancient as the rock itself. Their communication deepened, moving beyond riddles. Vargen shared visions, planting images directly into Thormund's mind, of star patterns to navigate by, of edible roots buried deep beneath the snow, of the subtle signs that heralded a coming storm. Thormund, in turn, provided the physical strength that the ethereal wolf lacked. He cut paths through snowdrifts that were chest-deep. He built shelters from pine boughs and packed snow, and he stood guard through the darkest hours, his axe ever ready for the more worldly dangers of the wilderness, the starving bears and the packs of common. Hungry wolves that gave Vargen's glowing form a wide, fearful berth. A strange camaraderie formed between the disgraced warrior and the cursed spirit. They were two broken beings, leaning on one another to cross a desolate landscape. Thormund found himself talking to Vargen as he would have a shield brother, recounting tales of his youth, of his first battle, of the woman he had once hoped to marry. He spoke of his father, a stern but fair man whose disappointment had been the sharpest blow of all. Vargen, in turn, shared the burden of its existence. It spoke of a lineage of ghost wolves, each one living a fleeting, solitary life, hunted by the ever-present despair of their inherited doom. They were born with the knowledge of Fenrir's rage and sorrow, a psychic wound that never healed. They watched the world of mortals, the turning of the seasons, the cycles of life and death, but could never truly be a part of it. They were eternal exiles, just as Thormund was. We see the joy of the hunt. Vargen's voice echoed one evening as they shared the warmth of a small fire, but we feel no hunger. We see the warmth of the pack, but we know no kinship. We are defined only by what we are not, and what our father will one day do. As they traveled, Thormund noticed a change in the wolf. Its light, once a steady, bright beacon, had begun to flicker. At times, its form would become terrifyingly translucent, as if the mountain wind could tear it apart. The journey was taking its toll, the curse tightening its grip. A new urgency spurred Thormund on, his own weariness forgotten in the face of his companion's fading existence. After weeks that blurred into a single, continuous struggle against the cold, Vargen led him to a sheer cliff face, a wall of granite that seemed to stretch to the heavens. It was a dead end. "There is no way through," Thormund said, his voice heavy with exhaustion and disappointment. "The path is not always for the feet," Vargen whispered, its light now a faint pulse. "Your past is a wall of stone, Thormund. How did you begin to climb it?" Thormund looked at the impassive rock. He thought of his confessions into the uncaring wind, the painful honesty that had eased the first layers of his self-loathing. He had spoken his truth. He had acknowledged his shame. With truth, Thormund said, understanding dawning. He walked to the cliff face and placed a hand against its frigid surface. He closed his eyes, not addressing the wolf, but the stone, the mountain, the world itself. "My name is Thormund, and I am an exile," he began, his voice clear and strong. "I was a man of honor, but I let pride and jealousy curdle my heart. I struck down my kinsman, Bjorn, not in fair combat, but in a drunken rage. I dishonored my jarl, I shamed my ancestors, and I broke my father's heart. My guilt is a stone, and I have carried it here." As he spoke the last word, a deep, grinding sound echoed from the cliff. A crack of light appeared, widening into a fissure, the air that poured out of it strangely warm and fragrant with the scent of pine and damp earth. An opening, a doorway in the stone, had revealed itself. Vargen gave a weak pulse of light. "The mountain has heard your truth. It will let us pass. But the true test lies within." Thormund stepped through the opening, leaving the world of ice and wind behind. He entered a valley, a world held out of time. The air was mild, the sky a gentle, unchanging twilight. Towering ancient trees, their leaves 100 shades of green and gold, formed a canopy high above. A stream, its water impossibly clear, chuckled over smooth, gray stones. The valley was a haven of profound peace, a sanctuary from the harsh realities of the world. And in the center of the valley, beside the tranquil stream, stood a circle of 9 rune stones, each one humming with a quiet, dormant power. Vargen padded silently beside him, its form seeming to stabilize in the valley's gentle atmosphere. "This is the place." The wolf's voice was filled with a reverence Thormund had never heard before. "The heart of stillness. Here, the power of fate is pliable." But as they approached the circle of stones, a figure emerged from the trees. He was a tall man, broad-shouldered, his face weathered and scarred. He wore the furs of a mountain hunter, but his eyes held a familiar fire of anger and betrayal. Thormund's blood ran cold. It was Bjorn, the man he had killed. So, the coward finally crawls to his hiding place, the apparition of Bjorn spat, his voice echoing with the pain of his final moments. He held no weapon, yet his presence was more menacing than any armed warrior. "This is the Valley of the Heart," Thormund, Bargen warned, its voice a faint whisper. "What you have carried within you now stands before you. This is your ghost, your doom. You must face him." Thormund stared at the specter of his past. This was not a memory, not a dream. The valley had given form to his guilt, and it stood before him, barring the way to redemption for both himself and the Starlit Wolf. The specter of Bjorn was unnervingly real. It was not a translucent ghost, but a solid-looking figure, radiating an aura of cold fury. It was Bjorn as Thormund remembered him from that terrible night, his face flushed with drink and anger, his eyes narrowed in challenge. The only thing missing was the fatal wound Thormund's own hand had delivered. "You ran." The specter's voice was a low growl, filled with contempt. "You struck me down in front of my kin, and then you ran to the mountains like a whipped cur. You call yourself a warrior." Thormund's hand instinctively went to the axe at his belt. His body screamed at him to fight, to silence the accusations as he had silenced the man. It was the same blind rage that had led to his exile, a familiar, fiery poison. "To fight him is to fight yourself," Bargen's voice cautioned, a steadying presence in the whirlwind of Thormund's emotions. "You cannot kill a memory with an axe. You will only feed it." Thormund forced his hand away from his weapon, his knuckles white. He stood his ground, his heart a war drum in his chest. "I did not mean for you to die, Bjorn. I was a fool, lost in my cups and my own foolish pride." "Your pride," the specter scoffed, taking a step closer. The air around him seemed to grow colder. "You were always drowning in it, Thormund the shield breaker. You thought yourself better than us. You coveted my father's praise, my place at the Jarl's side. You saw me as an obstacle." Every word was a poison dart, finding its mark in the soft flesh of Thormund's conscience. It was the truth, or at least a bitter shard of it. He had been jealous of Bjorn's easy charm, of the respect he commanded without the need for ostentatious feats of strength. "Yes," Thormund admitted, the word tasting like ash. "I was jealous. Your path seemed so easy, while I had to fight for every scrap of recognition. It was a weakness in me, a flaw." As he spoke this truth, a flicker of something, uncertain, crossed the specter's face. It was a momentary wavering, like a heat haze on the horizon. "Speak the truth that lies beneath the anger," Bargen urged. "The truth of the heart." Thormund took a deep breath, the clean, timeless air of the valley filling his lungs. He looked not at the specter of his rival, but through it, as if addressing the real man's memory. "I respected you, Bjorn," Thormund said, his voice quiet but firm. "I envied you, yes. But I also saw the good man you were. You were fair. You were loyal to your family and your Jarl. I saw the way Alara looked at you. You had a life ahead of you, a good life. And I, in a single moment of madness, stole it all away. Not just from you, but from everyone who loved you." He finally looked the specter in the eye. There was no anger left in his own gaze, only a vast, hollow sorrow. "My exile is just. My shame is deserved. If I could trade my life to give you back that single moment, I would do it without a second thought. I am sorry, Bjorn. From the depths of my soul, I am sorry." The specter of Bjorn stood silent. The rage in its eyes began to recede, replaced by a profound sadness that mirrored Thormund's own. The hard lines of its face softened. It was no longer the accuser, but simply the ghost of a man cut down in his prime. "I did not wish for this either, Thormund," the specter said, its voice losing its harsh edge, becoming the voice Thormund remembered from the mead hall, from the training yard. "I goaded you. I knew your temper. I played my own part." With those words, the specter began to dissolve. It did not vanish in a flash, but slowly became transparent, its form turning to shimmering motes of light that drifted upwards, vanishing into the twilight canopy of the valley. The coldness in the air dissipated, replaced by the gentle, neutral warmth of the sanctuary. Thormund stood, tears streaming freely down his face, making no move to wipe them away. The stone of his guilt, carried for so long, had finally crumbled to dust. He felt light. He turned to Vargen. The wolf's glow was brighter now, steadier than it had been in weeks. You have faced your doom, Thormund. You have unwritten your past by accepting it. Now, I must face mine. Vargen padded into the center of the circle of runestones. As it crossed the threshold, the 9 stones began to glow, their ancient carvings emitting a soft, golden light. The air crackled with power, a tangible force that made the hairs on Thormund's arms stand on end. The wolf lifted its head and let out a howl. It was not a sound made of air and vocal cords. It was a silent, psychic scream of pure despair, of inherited agony. Thormund felt it in his bones, in his soul. He saw flashes of Fenrir's rage, felt the crushing weight of the god's curse, the endless, lonely existence of the ghost wolves. It was a torrent of misery that would have shattered the mind of a lesser man. Vargen's form began to flicker violently. Shadows, dark and viscous like oil, began to bleed from its paws, pooling on the ground. These shadows writhed and coalesced, taking on a form of their own. A second wolf, a creature of pure darkness with eyes of burning embers, began to rise from the ground. It was the curse made manifest, the shadow of Fenrir given substance by the power of the valley. The shadow wolf lunged, not at Vargen, but at the runestones, its claws seeking to break the circle, to extinguish the light. It seeks to sever the connection. Vargen's voice cried out, strained and weak. To drag me back into the endless cycle. You must hold the circle, Thormund. Lend it your strength. Thormund did not hesitate. He had just won his own freedom from the ghosts of the past. He would not let his companion be dragged back into its prison of fate. He ran to the nearest runestone, placing his hands flat against its humming surface. He closed his eyes and poured all of his will, all of his newfound lightness of spirit, into the stone. He did not have magic, but he had a warrior's heart, a will forged in hardship and honed by regret. He thought of his apology to Bjorn, of the release he had felt. He thought of Vargen's patient guidance, of their shared journey. He pushed that feeling of connection, of purpose, into the humming granite. The runestone under his hands flared with a brighter light. He saw the other stones in the circle respond, their glow intensifying. The golden light formed a cage around the 2 wolves, trapping the shadow beast. The shadow wolf, snarling with silent fury, redoubled its efforts. It threw itself against the wall of light, causing the runes to flicker and dim. Thormund felt the strain, a psychic pressure that threatened to overwhelm him. It was a battle of will, of hope against an ancient, divine despair. Inside the circle of light, Vargen was struggling. Its luminous form was being stretched, pulled towards the shadow, in danger of being consumed by its own darkness. A fate cannot be destroyed, Vargen's voice came, a faint, desperate whisper in Thormund's mind. But perhaps it can be changed, transformed. Thormund, forgive him. Forgive who? Thormund grunted, straining against the psychic assault. My father, forgive Fenrir, for the doom he will bring, for the curse he has given me. The gods condemned him. Mortals fear him. His rage is fueled by an eternity of hatred. Someone, anyone, must offer him forgiveness. Let that be my final act. Not an echo of his rage, but an answer to it. Thormund looked at the struggling white wolf, and at the snarling shadow that was a part of it. He saw the endless cycle of hatred and retribution, the curse of the gods that had led to his own exile, that had doomed Vargen's entire line. The only way to break a chain was not to shatter it, but to unlock it. He took a deep breath and focused his thoughts, not on the shadow wolf, but on the distant, chained father it represented. Fenrir, he projected with all the force of his will, his voice a silent thought aimed at the heart of the myth. I, Thormund, a mortal man, see your pain. I do not condone the destruction you will bring, but I will not add my hatred to your chains. For the sorrow of your children, for the curse you did not ask for, I offer you not fear, but forgiveness. As the thought left his mind, a profound change occurred within the circle. The shadow wolf froze. The burning embers in its eyes dimmed. It did not vanish, but it ceased its attack. It looked at Varjan, and Varjan looked back. The two halves of a single soul, the light and the shadow, regarded each other in a moment of absolute stillness. Then, slowly, gracefully, the snow-white wolf walked towards its dark counterpart. There was no fear, only acceptance. As Varjan touched the shadow wolf, they did not fight or consume one another. Instead, they began to merge. Light and darkness swirled together, not in conflict, but in a perfect, harmonious dance. The blinding white and the absolute black coiled around each other, forming a new whole. Where the two wolves had stood, a single creature now took shape. It was still a wolf, but it was no longer ethereal. Its fur was the color of twilight gray, the shade of a wolf that could run through the forest, leaving tracks in the soil. Its eyes were not chips of ice or burning embers, but a deep, intelligent amber filled with a calm, ancient wisdom. It was no longer a ghost, nor a monster. It was, finally, simply a wolf. The cage of light from the runestones faded, their power expended. The new wolf took a breath, a true breath of air that misted in the cool valley twilight. It looked at Thormund, and he felt a final, gentle touch in his mind. The voice was different now, not a mental echo, but the feeling of a shared understanding of gratitude. It was the voice of a being made whole. Go, Thormund. Your exile is over. You have faced your past. Your heart is your own again. Live the life that is now yours to make. The gray wolf turned and, with the easy, powerful gait of a living creature, trotted towards the ancient trees. It paused once at the edge of the forest, looking back at the man who had helped it escape its inherited doom. It gave a single, brief nod, then disappeared into the deepening shadows of the heart of stillness. Thormund stood alone in the quiet valley, the silence broken only by the gentle chuckling of the stream. He was no longer Thormund the Shieldbreaker, nor Thormund the Exile. He was simply Thormund, a man who had journeyed into the heart of the mountains and the heart of himself, and had found a measure of peace in both. He turned his back on the circle of stones and walked towards the fissure in the rock, back to the world of wind and snow. The path down the mountain would be long, but he did not fear it. He did not know if he would be welcomed back to his village, or if he would have to forge a new life for himself on the edge of the wild. It did not matter. The chains of his past were broken. His future was unwritten. And he knew, with a certainty that settled deep in his bones, that somewhere in the vast, wild world, a twilight gray wolf, a child of Saga and Starlight, was finally and truly free to run.